We're Roll for Crit, and this is our review of Adellos, a 2 to 4 player tactics combat game in which everyone has their own special faction, and you are attempting to infiltrate the other team's spaces and take out their noble, their leader of their faction.
In this game, there are 4 factions to choose from: the Royals, the Undead, the Rebels, and the Clergy. Each of them have their own sort of unique traits, but mostly play very similar. You'll start by choosing a faction, then choosing one of 3 possible leaders to pick from. They all have their own unique little ability. You can tell they're a leader by having their group symbol there in the corner instead of the cost. In addition, you will get a certain amount of resources at the beginning to play troops to start off with. You will only be able to play in your castle for both this starting period and throughout the rest of the game. In the game, you'll be playing units in this castle, and you'll have 3 action points per turn in order to do actions. Playing characters is actually not one of them. You just need to play their cost. Most of them are for money, which can be seen there, but some of them, mostly the undead, have additional weird costs. Then you can either move your character based on their movement, which is usually 1 or 2. You can attack, which is taking a character and comparing just their attack stat to the opponent's defense. If they're equal or less, nothing happens. But if it's more, you kill off the character and it does not go back to their pool of characters to play. It is gone forever. Finally, there are the event cards. Certain characters you have may allow you to draw them at the beginning of your turn. Same thing as there's certain characters allow you to get income. They have different costs on them. Usually it's 1 action, but there are a couple that have different costs on there. They may either give you advantage in resources or maybe even stop your opponent from gaining resources. They all have different effects along those lines. But afterwards, you will usually end your turn. You may actually have additional action points, though, based on characters you play who have different certain keywords that give you action points, or controlling that center area.
If you manage to keep control of this area for a round, you get an extra action point on your turn, which can be a huge advantage. And depending on the number of players, there's going to be a certain number of rounds. And if you manage to hold it for that many rounds, then you actually win. So that's an alternate win condition as opposed to simply taking out everyone else's noble, which is the more standard way to do it, because it's going to be hard to hold this position when everybody sees you there. It's kind of a king of the hill type of thing. The different keywords on your units are also very important. Like you said, they could give you extra action points. You also have some that give you income, so each turn new coins to recruit new units to the field, or some that allow you to draw these event cards and be able to choose from and play them as you go, which can be a huge advantage, as we found in the game.
Yeah, most groups have something that you mentioned, but they also have sort of unique ones. For example, the Paladin and the Clergy has the Holy Smite action, which pretty much he can spend 2 actions to do his own sort of combat that doesn't require them to attack back, pretty much a free kill.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a bunch of different ones. The undead are weird. They have these time counters, so most of their units don't cost money, but they can't be used until a certain number of turns have passed. A lot of the nobles will just increase the power of your team. They have all kinds of different effects. Most of your units are going to be kind of standard, lower level units that are either for income or resources, or they're just kind of to draw people out. But then every faction usually has at least a couple of stronger, more powerful units that are a little scarier, that are your attack people. And yeah, you're moving around, you're trying to worm your way in, basically like a chess style game with these hex tiles, but obviously with a little bit more going on than typical chess.
Yeah, this is just like one of your, I guess I call them like cheaper almost versions of like a miniatures game. You don't have to buy full miniatures. I think like Summoner Wars is the one I'm thinking of in the head, when you have cards instead of, and you move around the field doing actions, as we said, what have you, all with different factions. Now this is set up with a 4-player game, but you can also do 2-player, in which you usually pretty much just use half the map with that tile still being allowed.
Right.
Because that's pretty much, as you said, the King of the Hill is a pretty big aspect. Another interesting thing that we forgot to mention is you have to use your action points. You can't just say, I'm going to move here and not use the other 2. Now, you can waste the other 2 in ways, but you still have to think of how to do that.
Yeah, so, you may want to just keep all your guys over here and keep them safe, but you might be forced to move some of them. It maybe be creative about it so you don't have to move too far, because like you said, you got to use those. And I think that the result of that is one of the things that I like the most about the game, which is it definitely emphasizes fast play and aggressive play, because it's really hard to do what we usually do in all these games, which is turtling. We like to hang out and defend ourselves and build up our base. This game is like, no, you're not doing that. You got to use your action points, so you're almost every turn, and also because the board is relatively small, you're only this far away from the enemy usually, you're going to end up on most of your turns moving and attacking someone. So things are going to happen. I think the play time on the box is like 45 to 60 minutes, so it packs a lot into a smaller area. Another thing is that the aim of the game is the winner is the person who is the last one standing. So if you're playing with 4 players and one person gets knocked out, that's it. That's the game. They're just done. The game keeps going, but they don't get to play anymore. So there is that player elimination aspect with a larger group than 2. But another thing that we can add to all of these things is they do have a lot of optional rules and variants that you can find, which change all those things that we said. So depending on how you feel, you want to house rule it, some of those things can be negated or changed a little bit.
Now, in a lot of these games, when there's sort of the free-for-all becomes a little bit you have to be a little bit careful about knocking someone out, not just because outside the table someone might be angry at you, but if you devote your resources to push everything over this way, maybe knock this player out, that might leave you open for someone to come around and get you. So one of the things that they did do is you get not only a small reward for defeating a player, but if they have any cards or money, you get that. So that's a big push in the multiplayer game to sort of take advantage of that, because maybe if I am able to defeat him, whatever cards in hand might just be able to help hold off the opponents until it gets my turn to sort of get back into position.
Yeah, it is an interesting balance you kind of are striking between units that are good for attacking or defending versus the units that are basically just there to provide income for you or cards. Because, yeah, getting money and cards, however you can get it, is very, very important. Being able to recruit new units, obviously, but we found that these event cards can be extremely powerful. Some of them even more so in multiplayer games than just a 1v1. And a lot of it seemed like our strategies came down to get cards, get this or things that give you more action points, and try to keep that lead. It's like very important. And if you have it, it sometimes can be easy to stay ahead of it.
It is nice that there's a central deck everyone uses, so it's not like everyone has to make their own weird deck of cards and you're not sure about that. It's just that what you see is what you get. But that also means you sort of know what is the possibilities that are out there. For example, one of the things that sort of happened, there's a card called Mind Control. It's that you take an action card from an opponent's hand into your own. And it turned out for me, I was able to just I got multiples by chance from the deck and just drained you of all your actions, so pretty much all your combat tricks.
Yeah, it can be devastating. So you really, I think it definitely can be easy to fall behind in the game like that, and sometimes hard to catch up. It's also one of those games where, you look at your faction and you have all these different units, and like you said, for the most part, they, once you see one thing that gives you income, they all kind of operate the same way. But you are still having to wrap your head around knowing which of these are best to put out there, which of my nobles should I use, and once I've picked one, what are the strategies that complement that noble? So it is something that rewards multiple plays because of that. And it plays quickly. It's if you like these kinds of hex combat games, I think it does it fairly well. I think the factions are interestingly designed. I think my biggest issues with the game came down to balance, and some of those, some certain strategies just seem to be stronger than others. But again, it might come down to repeated plays, future plays, where those types of things can change the meta of it, etc. Crits and misses for Adellos. Crits. Compared to other games of this genre, this one plays relatively quickly. It encourages you to get out there, fight your opponents, and not just hang back and wait for the action to come to you. The 4 factions included in the box play differently enough that they are fun to try out and experience, but are similar enough that it's not too hard to switch around and have to understand how a whole new faction plays.
While each group has its unique keywords, most of them do share certain keywords and abilities, making it pretty easy to switch from one group and the other. And because you have a common deck instead of each person having their own deck, you don't have to worry about customizing a deck before each playthrough to fit your game style. Misses. We're a little unsure how strong some strategies are compared to others. In particular, we found that the card advantage can be really damaging, as it can sometimes allow you to just pin down your opponent before they can do anything in response.
Better players than us may be able to come up with more unique tactical strategies and advantages in the game in their sessions, but we found that we tended to both go after the same thing, which was the cards.
The iconography and ability text on the tiles could use a little bit of work, not just in the rewording, but also maybe identifying some things, as we took a little while to realize what the nobles actually were. Optimal player count, we're really not sure what's best. The 1v1 was such a small board, we didn't really feel like we were able to play with our units to their fullest potential. Obviously playing with 3 players is off, and the 4v all, which seems to be maybe what the game was intended for, the player elimination seemed to be really annoying at times because someone can be eliminated pretty early on, comparatively speaking.
The game does play quickly, so it's not the end of the world, but in general, player elimination is just not something that we're ever going to be a fan of in a game.
As far as these card or tile movement war games go, it does a pretty good job at trying to streamline it into more of a smaller board, make it so actions are a bit more fast-paced and combat does occur instead of turtling. But we do think it still has a couple of flaws.
Yeah, definitely. It's, we enjoyed playing it, and I think with some tweaking, and like I said, they do have all those optional rules, which, maybe is not super fair to consider in a review because they kind of feel like a little house rule-ish, but they are there, and some of them I think actually I prefer than what's actually in the base rulebook, which they recommend that you play with first before experimenting with that. We should also say that this is a version of the game that came out before they had a Kickstarter for it, and I believe that for the most part those components and everything are the same, but in the final version that came from that campaign, there may be some cleaned up things in the rulebook, etc. So something you may want to keep in mind just so we get it out there to be full, in the interest of full transparency. So the game is called Adellos, and those are our thoughts on it. If you've played it, talk to us in the description, the comments down below. Let us know what you think, which factions you think are pretty cool or not.
I think your favorite was the undead.
The undead were cool. They made it easy. You don't have to worry about money. I like that.
I enjoyed my clergy because I like my paladins.
Yeah. Well, because you are a paladin deep down inside. I'm a hideous vampire. I'm also Jonathan.
And I'm Will.
And this was a Roll for Crit review.
Don't forget to click that like button and, of course, subscribe for even more excellent videos.
I subscribed and now I'm rich.